Hey everybody, Nevin Gusak, your host of the Populist Patriot. I got another live stream here. I came across this article, U.S. quietly urges Russia fertilizer deals to unlock grain trade. Well, immediately when I first look at that headline, this is on Bloomberg News. This article's authors, reporters are Elizabeth Elkin, Daniel Flatley, and Jennifer Jacobs, dated June 13th, 2022. Well, why the hell are we relying on Ukraine for grain, number one? And number two, why are we importing fertilizer from Putin's Russia? That's nonsense. Again, it goes back to Marshall Sokolovsky. You know, if you depend on things like food and, fertilizer, grains, your food, your lifeblood of human survival on geopolitical enemies, they could use that as a stick to beat you over the head with. Again, we need to be of the commodities and manufactured goods that are strategic that we should produce here in its entirety and not import, especially from countries over the high seas. Grain and fertilizer are items that we need to produce at home within the United States. And okay, I understand Canada is a huge grain supporter. I get that. But as much as possible, we need to utilize our own grain, produce our own grain, our own wheat, and our own other grains, barley, wheat, etc., corn. I mean, we're a huge producer of corn and whatnot, no question about that, and fertilizer. So anyway, the article talks about how the U.S. government is quietly encouraging agricultural and shipping companies to buy and carry more Russian fertilizer, according to people familiar with the efforts, as sanctions fears had led to a sharp drop in supplies, fueling spiraling global food costs. Well, why the fuck is Joe Biden not encouraging a policy of autarky? And of course, the Republicans don't believe in that because they're a bunch of free trade fanatics. Most of them are Tea Party Reagan people that believe in, they don't believe the government should do squat to help the people and help the nation as a whole. They just believe in the imaginary invisible hand. While meanwhile, rivals like Russia and China discard crap economic theories like the invisible hand, and they use the free trade, free market people to their advantage. So they use the free market and free trade, this undisciplined notion of freedom, to destroy free nations like us, while they use real world economic policies and plans to build up their industries and exploit the greed of American capitalists for their benefit. And of course, our policymakers need to realize that, and we need to really restructure our economic and trade making policy accordingly to reflect the realities of the great global game of chess amongst rivals and enemies. So the United Nations, the effort is part of a complex and difficult negotiations underway involving the United Nations to boost deliveries of fertilizer, grain, and other farm products from Russia and Ukraine that have been disrupted by Putin's invasion of Ukraine. And of course, U.S. and European officials have accused correctly the Kremlin of using food as a weapon, preventing Ukraine from exporting. Russia denies that, of course, as it has attacked the key ports, and it blames the shipments disruptions on American sanctions. And the EU and US have built exemptions into their restrictions on doing business with Russia to allow trade in fertilizer, of which Moscow is a key global supplier. And here's the situation. Why am I not reading news? And maybe you guys can help me in the audience. I think there's like one or two listeners right now. Thank you. And thank you for the likes, by the way, on my previous live streams. Why am I not reading news about how are we going to reshore fertilizer production? I mean, what the hell? Why am I not reading that? I mean, I understand we need to take short-term measures with the exemptions and the sanctions. I get that. But why am I not reading that American federal government and Congress in his meeting and boom, pulled a bill right out saying that we are going to reshore fertilizer production in the United States? And this is where we're going to have a new political and economic state structure where you have a culture where business and labor and the government and the national security apparatus can act in unison to work on things and work on projects like reshoring fertilizer. And also what we're going to have to do is also de-Reaganize and de-Clintonize the economy, make it less focused, make disincentivize financialization in terms and more towards traditional private investment and production, for example, rather than crap like stock buybacks and all these other crazy financial schemes. And that's ultimately, it all goes back to restructuring our home political and economic system. And then once we do that, the core of our nation's political class, our economic class, our elites, and once their minds are reoriented, then we can pursue the reforms that we need to do. Then we can come down together, business, labor, government, including the national security apparatus, and say, look, we're in trouble. We need to produce our own fertilizer. We shouldn't be at the mercies of hostile foreign powers, global conflicts, which are going to interrupt grain supplies. That should not be the case. We should be sourcing our grain from the Midwest of the United States in its entirety. And if need be, from allied countries that are not far away, like Canada, for example. So again, sanctions are always going to have loopholes, as there is no doubt about that. In this case, I can understand its necessity, but we really need to be reading news saying that Joe Biden and the Congress, in a bipartisan effort, either collaborates with business and labor, particularly business, and farmers, which includes business, and the national security apparatus in reshoring all of our fertilizer production where we don't import fertilizer at all. There's no reason to do that. That's suicidal. You piss off a country, there's a conflict, and boom, your fertilizer imports are interrupted. And then what do? You're left holding the bag, and the country is really screwed. Again, supply chain issues. Again, free trade doesn't work. Globalization doesn't work. Time to throw away unadulterated economic liberalism. I'm going to mention this on every show until this, hopefully, subscribers are in the thousands, and hopefully it gets through to the freaking brains of the political right in this country that, oh my God, we actually care about national security, and Milton Friedman and Ronald Reagan and George W. Bush and Ted Cruz ain't the answer. It has to go back to Alexander Hamilton. It has to go back to Abraham Lincoln and Henry Carey and other theorists and economists related and politicians who adhered to the American School of Political Economy. That's the way to go. So I conclude this live stream. Got to make a phone call. I might do another live stream in a little bit. If not, I bid you all good night. I hope you enjoyed my shows, my live streams, and obviously there'll be more to come. God bless you all, and have a great evening, and stay safe.